Raj Chaudhuri, aka Raji Rags. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Mate, I've been wanting to have a chat with you for quite some time now, and I was sort of opened up to a little window to who you are musically and professionally from years ago from your Jay Dilla podcast. And
oh wow,
yeah. So I didn't realize that you were such a hip hop head, to be quite honest.
Big time.
Yeah, exactly. I've now realized that. And also, like when you were at the helm of Boiler Room, as the head of music, I had some email exchange with you back then. Not sure if you remember, but when I first I think it was the first few years when I moved to the region, and I had reached out to you guys through Aaron in Australia, Aaron Flanagan.
I don't actually remember this.
I
don't remember this.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. That's fine, man. You would have got 1,000 emails, but various people from around the world. But it was a little bit of exchange, and I was hoping to try to like explore how to get Boiler Room into the region, and it's been years since then, and obviously Boiler Room is now.
What did I say?
You were very very helpful and being completely honest with me. Like, so it wasn't ready for time to enter this market at the time, and you guys were exploring. I think, and Bradley Zero was still working with you guys as well. So he'd been making he'd come over and he was making some trips through the region already, sort of was establishing new relationships and what have you. So anyway, cut a long story short, I'm glad.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
It's all good. Thanks for.
I just hope I was polite. And
you were definitely.
There was definitely a point where I was head of music at Boiler Room where my inbox, my phone, my messages were just like hundreds of people saying, "How do I get a Boiler Room? How do I do this?" It was like hard to keep up.
No doubt.
It was a fun job.
Well, thanks again for coming on today. I one of the things I wanted to chat to you about is your A&R role and the significance of an A&R person during this time, and how to keep the wheels turning. According to articles and what I see online and reports and what I've heard from other label owners as well, record sales seem to be up. How are you finding this at the moment? And tell me how does an A&R person keep the juices flowing now during this time?
It's a good question. I mean, like, I was just A&Ring for RNS. We won't talk about it too much, but I just left that role. But A&R, I mean, it's the same as ever, really. Like, there's always a market for people buying music. I think there's even more of a market in the world I particularly sort of inhabit and I'm a fan of, and I'd consider peers. A lot of people are going straight to consumers with things like Bandcamp. There's much more of a DIY ethic, especially when live and touring nightlife has all just disappeared. So, and also everyone's stuck at their house, like making music, right? So I think there's obviously challenges with a time like this, especially with the economy and people losing income. But I also think there's been I've definitely seen a huge burst of creativity, productivity. There's a lot of people, talented people who are actually I'm actually one of them. I've started making music this year because of lockdown, and I've released a few tracks and compilations, and I don't think anything like an A&R role is essentially working with artists, discovering artists, and working. I don't think anything's really changed. What's changed is not necessarily the process of that side. It's more the process of how does an artist make money? How do they release? What's the best route for them? Do you go over label? Do you self-release? How do you make a career in a time where, I think, the pandemic's raised a lot of questions in sort of music industry, which probably maybe needed to be addressed, because a lot of producers and music makers and stuff might not earn that much money because their revenue stream is small. If you're talking about streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music or whatnot, or, you know, less people are buying actual, you know, sort of to own music. So they go off stream platforms, which means the payout's small. So the music industry suddenly veered towards live being a more important part of income, or brand deals, or whatnot. So I think that probably needed to be redressed, because it felt a bit too heavily weighted, where, you know, superstar DJs who might not even release music can earn big figures, and the music that's being played by that DJ, those people aren't earning a fraction of that, you know. So but I don't think anything's changed with the role of A&R. I think, well, I mean, an A&R's role is the same, it's to find music, but I think what is changing is the whole, you know, climate around it, and the whole sort of like infrastructure.
Yes.
Because certain revenue streams have been blocked off because of the pandemic.
So that was I wanted to ask you. So budget restrictions are now, you know, that is a limitation, because budgets aren't the same, and there's no kind of like. But however, if there's music sales, obviously that's where revenue is, and distribution, your Spotify's and what have you. But in terms of, obviously there's no touring, so that's another big chunk of the income stream that's not available right now. I
mean, I speak to a lot of labels. I was just working with R&S. I've been in quite close contact with Warp. I've had chats with Nin, like, I mean, most labels, most have put back their release. You know, I'm mainly in the independent. I don't really my world isn't the major label world.
Right.
But then obviously a lot of friends I know run small labels and stuff, but most labels have pushed back releases because of more to do with timing and like communication. And there is, touring was a part of pushing an artist or an album campaign or something, which obviously it is kind of put on hold, but a lot of labels haven't been impacted that much, or the people I've been speaking to, with sales. They've restructured how their rollout plan for music and stuff, but the money hasn't necessarily shrunk with this income through music releases. It's more the other stuff around it. So
release schedules though have
loads of labels have pushed back their release schedule. Loads push through to next year. Some in the hope that, you know, touring kicks back off, and you know, touring around a release is normally a big part of getting it out there and getting it out to different regions and cities and whatnot, on a sort of like old school. Right, we tour it around, and then every city we go, we hit it up, and we try to do, you know, radio.
I mean, I remember at the start of like the year when like the pandemic was kicking off, the rule of thumb was, you know, don't release any music now until it's over. Then all of a sudden you start seeing people still putting music out and on the labels, and most of them are, you know, with the big budgets, are the sort of superstar artists, whether it's dance music or pop music. Either way, you're still seeing music coming out, even down to the independent label. Like independent labels, there's still music coming out. Music will always come out. And I actually think in times like this, there's going to be more a sort of, you know, people are going to talk about this as a period in history. Yeah, for sure.
And with that, there's always like a documentation or you know, sort of movement or something that comes out of it, be it art, music, literature. Because this is something that, you know, when's the last time something affected the world all like globally and ubiquitous as this, you know. So I don't think. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, that's all right. We're saying the I guess the music's still coming out, and it's not really. Look, I would have to agree with you though. There is a shift in the way, because I actually think some of the music that's been coming out this year has been incredible, probably because of the pandemic, because people are, I don't know, being more creative. I don't know what it is, but some of the music that's coming out this year is just amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So, so are you going to continue doing any sort of independent A&R work?
Yeah, it's kind of been figured out at the moment. I'm working quite closely with a band, and we're putting together a collaborative project or collaborative album essentially. That's going to have a lot of artists from mainly UK, but a few US artists all involved. A lot of different vocalists and singers, and it's good. I hate to be that, but I can't really talk about it yet because we're sort of like, you know,
it's still early days.
Well, yeah, we'll probably finish half the album, but yeah, and I've just kind of got involved with him. It's like essentially an old friend who is an incredible drummer in this band, and we just sort of like, timing was actually good because if he asked me to manage this band a year ago, I would have said no.
Right.
But, you know, because I was a busy guy. But now I'm like, oh, the clubs are closed. I can't tour. I can't travel. Yeah, let's do this. So we've kind of put it together, and it's people I've known for a while, and some of the artists we're working with, some of my favorite artists of all time, if I'm honest. And but yeah, that's going to be coming out at some point next year.
No, I look forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So you know, the biggest challenges that you're facing right now, I would say, are sort of finding new ways to adapt to like will bring new income streams. So this would be one of them: managing artists, managing bands. Yeah. Is there anything else that you're doing at to help, you know, get you through it, and other kind of creative ideas that you've got happening at the moment?
I mean, the big thing is I've been a DJ for a long time. Actually, just before the pandemic. Although to be fair, I actually was in Asia when it kind of kicked off, and then I came over.
Right.
And I was like, I had an Asia tour planned, right? And then I was like, all of my Asia tour got cancelled because of COVID-19. But don't worry, I'll go back to the UK, and I've got a bunch of gigs lined up. And then I came, and then UK went into lockdown, came back. But the big thing, just before lockdown, I started making music and got a studio space, and that's kind of how I hooked up with this drummer friend, and working with the band. But the big thing I've really been focusing on is making music, which is, it's a crazy thing where I've DJ'd and worked in music my whole life, and it was one of those things where I'm like, I should really make tunes, you know, like I'm surrounded by this. It's my day job, it's my night job for the clubs, and I've always just used the excuse of not having time to, I'm just really busy, and I probably was very busy, but the big thing was making tunes and really focusing on actually doing that, and I enjoy it and love it so much. I'm like, I don't know why the hell I didn't do this sooner, because it's really easy to use the excuse of time, not having it. And I think a lot can be said for like breaking up your time so that you've got your work time and you've got some downtime. But I've definitely watched things like, you know, a Breaking Bad box set series. And when you count the amount of hours, you're like, I just dedicated 100 hours to this one show.
So putting in
100 hours, you could learn a language or something. Like, and I have actually enjoyed making music where I consider it like downtime, and it's an enjoyable process. And I'm like, there's obviously frustrations with learning anything new, frustrations of knowing what you want to do and not being able to do it. And that sort of learning curve that you have on yourself and your own feelings of, you know, I wouldn't call it inadequacy, but, you know, the sort of like not being where you want to be yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which when, you know, after a certain age and you've been DJing for a certain amount of time, almost learning a new skill, you're back to being a beginner. And
triggers it triggers all thoughts, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's like anything when you're starting out. There's the sort of initial bars of like, oh cool, I'm doing something new. Then you hit a bit of a block with your learning curve, and then you get frustrated, and you need to persevere through that, where you don't really need to persevere through watching Breaking Bad. You just flick on the next episode and you just your mind switches off, where you actually have to, your downtime or the sort of enjoyable time which you want to turn into something ends up feeling like work, because you have to overcome certain. But I think you know, like a lot of people, I've had to readjust. But making music is a big focus. It's not yet really earning me money, but it's definitely a fun process. I see, I'm not doing it to make money. I'm just doing it because it's fun. But in terms of readjusting, you know, I just did some like kind of paid live streams earlier this year. I do loads. I've always been, since leaving, I've been a freelancer for a while. Since I left Boiler Room, I've always been a person who just kind of helps out on random little things. So I still kind of do that. I guess you'd call it music consulting for, you know, labels and different sort of brands. So I guess I've still been doing that, like kind of doing little bits with Warp, kind of working a bit with Spitfire Audio, who make like software instruments, and what else have I been doing? Kind of did some like consulting for a label. I just like, I don't know. Sometimes people just want to chat to me and I chat back. Will you pay me for that? Like, okay, yeah, great, sweet. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's been hard. Like even when I had day jobs, which you know, I left my day job at Boiler Room. I did that because in the background I always had clubs. Like clubs have kind of been my main source of income for most of my adult life. Or not, if not my main, it's always been there on the side, and then it grew to a point where, you know, it pays me as much as a full-time job, and that's all been taken away from me.
What aspect? What aspect of just touring or program?
So no, I mean, I still do, but obviously we haven't done one since February. But I run a party called Living Proof.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that.
Party.
Yeah.
And it is for a long while. It was kind of, which is funny. It's funny. Before we started this call, people know me either as like, oh, Boiler Room or RNS or Bleep, and they're like, think I'm the techno guy. And there's a whole section of London who have no idea that I do that. Yeah. And they just know me as the hip hop guy.
Right. So it's the other way around.
It's this weird, like, you know, dual personality where, depending on how you've interacted me, like you've sent me an email when I was head of music at Boiler Room, so you'll be like, oh, this guy must be a techno guy. And then there's probably kids in London who've just seen me play at hip hop parties for X amount of years. And as on a personal level, the duality is great, because on the one side there's like a more industry focus, working with labels and A&R and independent electronic music. And on the other side, there's a party I've been running with my friends for years that's, you know, did well. But on a personal level, like when it comes to me as a DJ and wanting to DJ places or making music, that duality can often face challenges. I'm not trying to complain about it. I've been very lucky, but I did a t-shirt earlier this year that, it was something I wrote because when I did a mixtape during lockdown, I wrote 2 techno for the hip hop kids and 2 hip hop for the techno crowd.
I think I saw that.
And I definitely have felt that a bit because, you know, in London, I kind of like mainly get played to book to DJ hip hop, but outside of London, because my party is a very London focused party, like a hip hop party in London. Like we don't have radio, we don't do anything sort of on a like online settings. It's like it's a party in London. If you like hip hop in London, you know about it. But beyond on a sort of like outside of London, you know, no one really knows about it. But outside of London, I get booked to play electronic music, and sometimes I'm in London going, why can't I like? Sometimes I don't really like that pigeonhole because if you listen to my radio show, or even my A&R or anything I've done, my music tastes are very broad.
Yes, right.
And I actually hate that sort of pigeonholing. And but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah. I would think it's always, especially when you, because that's kind of one of the challenges I've always faced is in terms of my broad taste in music as well. I started pushing more sort of disco and house and techno here in Dubai, so that's kind of like what people sort of know me of. But in Australia, people know me as the global beats guy and hip hop guy. You know, so there's this. I mean, I try to play all of it really in my music set in the sets, but I understand I can relate to that.
It's funny how a different region or part of the world will think of you as one thing because it's how you've engaged with that particular.
Yeah.
You know, so you sent me an email when I was at Boiler Room. So when you were like, I didn't realize you were hip hop, that's because you've engaged with me online over an online music platform, while many people in London will not even know I do that. And I've just been to a party that I've DJ'd at where it's like a genre hit, you know, my party was a hip hop party. And I get it. Like, there's a region sometimes those pigeonholes exist because if you came to a hip hop party and a DJ was playing techno, you'd be like, well, what the fuck is this? I didn't pay for this. Like, you know, so like, I get it. But obviously sort of as a creative ambition, sometimes you want to be a bit more free than that, which is why I think I enjoy radio so much because there's no you
can dip in and out of different ways. Yeah, of course. But I think, like, as I said at the start, I after hearing your piece on Jay Dilla on Donuts and your in-depth info that you had on there, I was just like, okay, he's not just talking about Jay Dilla's record. Like this guy knows some stories behind it.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I'm Jay Dilla obsessed.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, there's not much I haven't sort of like delved into in terms of the discography of Jay Dilla.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was definitely like a musical obsession. And one I wear proudly as well. Like,
yeah.
You know,
I'm a hip hop kid since day one, since I was a kid. So it's basically, that's what started my whole music career, really, just being obsessed with hip hop, you know?
Yeah.
And I got into electronic music after, like later in my teens.
Yeah. I do think there's a beautiful thing about hip hop because it's such a gateway drug for so many other types of music. Like if you really get into hip hop, then you get into the art form and the sampling and the leading on to, you know, because now when I buy a record, I DJ mainly now with, you know, digitally, you know, USBs or record box or whatnot. But when I buy records and vinyl, I'm mainly buying like gospel and jazz and soul and, you know, I definitely think that's because of, as a hip hop kid, you look into it and the sources and then suddenly you're like, oh, actually, you know, maybe I don't need Primo or Dilla to flip this. Maybe I could just listen to the original and you start getting into like a whole world of music, like, you know, prog rock and kraut rock and all types of stuff, which I definitely think hip hop was a real important gateway drug for me to develop my music taste to a much broader and wider sort of.
Yeah. Well, I there was a peer of mine when I was, I started a little label back in the early 99, 2000. And it was a production thing that I started. And the guy who I was working with at the time, he used to say to me, it's all hip hop, man. it's all hip hop, house, techno, it's all hip hop. It just dumbfounded me, but then I understood where he was coming from, like
I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, it's the ethos is like where it comes from, like the extended breaks, the whole DJ philosophy. It really does come from hip hop when you think about it. Like it's all hip hop, So and
then I mean, like, it's because in hip hop comes from like dance and subculture, and cool work, but then there's also just the history of black music, and there's so many different things. I mean, it's all music.
Tell me, so the Living Proof and the Bubble Chamber Collective, they're things that are keeping you busy still at the moment, or
no? They're my parties,
right?
The Living Proof is the hip hop party, and Bubble Chamber is a rave basically. We do with a bunch of friends I all met at Boiler Room actually, and we would throw little raves in the back of pubs. We did it in a sex dungeon one time. We kind of found a home in this place called Unit 18, which is like a sort of like industrial garage kind of warehousey thing. They were sort of keeping me busy until lockdown. But they're essentially two parties. DJ collectives. Again on the sort of like the hip hop side one, and I wouldn't call it techno. I would call it just like rave, because it could just as easily be like crazy jungle and electro, or like Max loves to play a bit of like crazy trance, and like it's just to finish at like 8 a.m. vibe rave, like.
So where I was like. What I wanted to ask you was: is there anything that from those projects that you are still doing at the moment to keep them sort of in the spotlight?
Living Proof, not so much. Like Living Proof, we're all individually doing stuff. So it's 4 members. I'm the only one left in London, even though it's started as a London party. Budgie moved to LA. And he's smashing it. He's a producer. He's worked on the last 2 Kanye albums. He's just produced a bunch of tracks on New Action Bronson. Wow. He's just in LA doing what he does best, which is smoking weed and making beats. And then Khalil and Snips are both in New York, both sort of like working DJs.
But so you guys are all spread out.
Yeah, we're all very spread out. Yeah, I'm the only one left. Budgie was the first to move, I think, because he works quite closely with Alchemist, and I think I think Alchemist said, if you come to LA, work from my studio, I'll hook you up with all the artists.
You done?
They've just got they're like brothers. They're like,
that's awesome.
Crazy. Their sort of connection, and so he was just like, screw this, I'm going to go to LA, and like he had a. Khalil, when we did a Living Proof New York, met a girl, and in fact, I think Snips met his wife there, but Khalil moved over for a girl to New York, and then Snips followed soon after. He's always been New York obsessed. Like he's like as hip hop as it gets. Like he lives and breathes it. So him not living in New York, kind of like. He just was like a fish out of water. London's his home, but it wasn't really. He was meant to.
Gone to Mecca.
But individually, everyone's doing different things. Snips and Budgie focusing on production. Khalil's doing like Twitch live streams, just kind of like staying busy.
So are they using the Living Proof brand around?
Well, I mean, people know, but no, they're kind of everyone's got their own individual
thing going.
Like musically as well, we're like. I definitely veered off the most from straying away from hip hop. And Khalil is kind of just as much like a party DJ. Like he'll play loads of like drum and bass and jungle and Afro beats and whatnot. But when we do Living Proof, it's a hip hop party. But no, I mean, well, Khalil's Instagram name is Khalil Living Proof. So
okay, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so I guess everyone sort of uses the brand a bit, but we're not doing anything actively as Living Proof.
Right. Okay.
It feels weird too, because if I'm honest, it's always, yeah, it's about us, but it's kind of more about the party, you know. And like without the party, it feels weird to push stuff. I think there's been two different approaches during lockdown. One which is like, oh, okay, I'm not DJing or in the clubs, but I sort of need to stay present, which sort of works on an individual basis. But the party, we were so bad with social media. We'd only post it when we're like, right, we got a party next week. We should probably sell some tickets. But we didn't really, we didn't think of it as a brand as such.
Yeah.
You know, we ran 12 years. We only did like 2 t-shirts, and everyone was like, "Why don't you do more merch and do this and that?" And the truth is, we were just, one, we were a bit badly organized. 2, the 4 of us individually couldn't agree on much. We could, like, even for us to agree to a t-shirt design would be like 100 WhatsApp messages arguing back and forth, or face to face where we just be screaming at each other, going, "You don't know your music. You dress crap. Look at the way you dress. There's no way we're trusting you. We're like brothers, you know. We've known each other that long, and we weren't really like." And I think there actually was a point where we're like, you know what? For the sake of our friendship, let's like just accept it for what it is, which is a party that, you know, friends who are like brothers because they've known each other so long run. But let's not like, you know. We could have pushed it more, and maybe we needed like a lead figure. But when you go into something as a partnership, all equal, sometimes it's hard to make decisions when personalities clash. So no, we've not actually been doing much with Living Proof. Bubble Chamber, there's like a monthly radio show on Bellamy. Even that, it doesn't have the same energy because we have to record it from home, and I think. Again with Bubble Chamber, it was so much about the people. It's like a big crew. There's 6 of us, and it was more just like going out to radio or the party as a crew, hanging out, all of our friends around, and you know that. So we're sort of like doing the radio show remotely. But yeah, the brands of the parties. I even hate that I use that term, brand, but the parties have kind of. Sometimes without a space for them, you know, I definitely had the conversation. Actually, some of the Living Proof lot wanted to do stuff. They wanted to do live streams. They wanted to do this and that. And I was like, I don't really want to do it because everyone's doing it. And Bubble Chamber, everyone was in agreement. Everyone was like, let's just party. Let's just like forget about it for a bit. When the clubs reopen, we'll start being active, so to speak. Yeah. So we're all in agreement there.
What before, like just going back to what we're like sort of discussing earlier about, you know, keeping finding like ways to sort of adapt to the change, like what's happening now. So keeping busy and like just doing things. Like, is this? Tell me a bit about that. Like I read it in your questions before about, you know, wanting to kind of like just keep active. So is that, and you were saying before, you know, doing music production, you know, finding new ways to keep creative, just keeping the mind stimulated and working towards, How is that something that you encourage, like, you know, encourage yourself every day to just keep busy and
100%. Like, I don't know whether it's the Indian in me, like you know, my parents, you know, obviously I was born in London, but I'm Indian, and the work ethic of brown people, it can be insane, you know, like, and also, you know, I picked a very unorthodox career path where you
should have been a doctor.
Well, I mean, you say that kind of jokingly, but up until the age of very late in my career, you know, I had my mum and dad say, okay, but you're going to stop this, right? And go back to uni and study accounting or like be a doctor, you know. But if I don't have work, I will make myself work. Yeah. You know, like if, okay, I don't have parties or I'm not working for this company or that company. I'll just make my own. I wake up, I'll do a to-do list. I've got a whiteboard in front of me, and I'll be like, right, well, you've got to make a beat today, or you've got to like record a mix and edit a video to it, or go studio, go see Giles, guy I'm working with, like see what's going on. Like
there's always something to do, right? There's
always something to do, and if other people aren't giving you work, you make your own work, and kind of like even when I've had day jobs, people have thought I'm mad because I've walked out of really nice day jobs where they're like, why did you do that? Like, why have you walked out of that position? And I mainly do it because I like to constantly challenge myself, and I like to not get comfortable. And I also like being my own boss. So even with an amazing job, you're still someone else's, like you're still working for someone else. So during lockdown, I've done loads of just like self-initiated projects where, not even during lockdown, like I think my whole life I've just writing a to-do list on my phone or is like.
So do you think it is a cultural thing, like as well, like that ingrained in you? Because I can relate to it because my heritage is Greek, and Greeks were, when they moved to Australia, they were hardworking, and that was something that was something that was ingrained in me as well. So I can relate to what you're saying. I'm always like, if I haven't got work or business, I'm just like keep myself busy, like just try to find ways to make an income or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is not saying that non-Indian or Greek people don't work
exactly.
hard.
yes.
But what you said about your parent, I think there's a thing of I think it was
the migrants kind of way.
Definitely. Yeah. Like my parents moved over in the 70s, and my mum was 18, couldn't speak English, and I think you do work harder, and you do have parents who kind of expect it of you as well.
Yeah.
And I think because I picked an unorthodox thing where my brother works in accounting, my dad works in accounting, everyone was like, what are you doing? Like, that's not a real job. Like, how do you explain the concept of, boiler room to your mum who was born and raised in India? Like, how do you explain that? And, it took a long while for them to understand it. Like, I think the first time I remember my mum being like, oh wow, I'd done loads of stuff that I thought was like way cooler, you know what I mean? I'd like, but saying, hey, I booked A$AP Rocky's first European show doesn't mean much to my mum. Or like, hey, I'm a resident of NTS Radio, which for me is the ultimate radio station. But when I did BBC Asian Network, she heard the word BBC, which she recognized.
Yeah. She
heard the word Asian. She was like, wow, that's amazing. I was like, really? It's kind of naff for me, but it meant something. When I say I put on events with artists and I say, hey, I'm doing a party with this amazing DJ or producer or rapper, or my mum can only equate. So it's sort of like Madonna at the O2. And I'm like, yeah, sort of like that, but much, much smaller. Like, I can't explain that I'm throwing a rave in the basement of a sex dungeon to my mum, but like, from what she knows of sort of Western music culture, it's probably consumed through TV. She's not going clubbing. She's not, So I definitely think the work ethic sort of does derive from them in a sense, even though it's not necessarily the work that they wanted me to do. I think it was.
I sometimes question whether, like, now some of that ethos or that mentality or that kind of mindset is actually practical in today's times. I just don't think, like, because to me, I found also, because my folks came to Australia just post, they're kids of industrial revolution, I guess. So it came, and of course the the depression, from post-depression, like from the depression era. So there was like this scarcity.
You mean your parents?
Well, my grandmother, and then my grandmother moving to Australia and taking both their families, because obviously they're two separate families, but they came in the 50s into Australia, which was kind of, and so that I feel like that whole hard work ethic was, there's a mentality of scarcity as well. Like I feel like there's this kind of like fear of survival, which is it's all real. It's real, like that was real to them. But that mentality now can also work against you. Like, we've got to pay bills and we've got to pay rents and what have you. But I feel like that coming from a place of just kind of like just do whatever and work actually has a detrimental kind of, it can work against you. I don't know if you found that. That's been my experience. But
working too hard.
Excessively and not following. There's I think there is a part of it. I think that people can follow their passions as well. I think that to a degree, like there is, I feel that, we can follow our passions. Whereas before it was different for them,
Yeah, I mean, a thing I'm known for is so even like the jobs I've left, and a thing I'm known for is, I hate that it's such a corny term, but it's the work hard, play hard. So like I do work, incredibly hard when I do, but one thing I do a lot is travel. And I DJ while I travel and stuff, but I've left jobs and then I've just gone traveling for like 4 or 5, like I think 10 months. I'm like I really love traveling. So, and actually something I've learned this year about myself is, obviously, like everyone, UK's locked down to many extents. There's travel restrictions and whatnot. So this is the longest since February I've been in London without going any. I mean, I've gone to other parts of the UK on a little day trip to the beach or something, but this is the longest I've not got my passport and gone to another country and done something, whether I'm working on an event or doing a gig. But I've actually realized, I think a lot of people have done a lot of realization about themselves. I've definitely realized that I've probably used travel as a way of balancing my work-life ratio. Because you work very hard when you're in London, and not that I don't look at emails and do work. I've traveled so much that I have to kind of always be working.
Yeah.
But you do sort of get a bit of a pass when an email comes or a call comes, and maybe it's something you don't necessarily want to deal with right away, or it's not urgent, and you're like, hey, I'm traveling right now, and they're like, oh, okay, just hit us back when you're back. So you can use it as a sort of self-regulation of, and then I don't know that I'm in Asia and my wife's Taiwanese and I'm actually going to be there for like a month or 2 months, but like they're like, oh, okay, he's not in work mode, he's in Raj play mode right now. So I now just being stuck in London, I've actually realized I've used it because I do think you can overwork. Like, it's a big problem. It's a big problem with our generation. I think it's amplified in times like this, when you wake up, everyone's working from home, you just work, and then you work even later because there's not it's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, time to go home. You just keep working until you fall asleep, have a meal, and then, people do overwork. And but I've regulated it a lot with intervals of being, I'm clocking off for a few months, and then I'll come back and I'll throw myself into a particular project, kind of work with someone or work on this, something.
Yeah. Sorry, go on. You were going to say?
No, yeah, but to answer your question, I do think, yeah, there are like, you know, yeah, I think your question was kind of about can you like the work ethic be not a good thing?
Well, I think, no, what I was getting at is that you obviously, even with your passion, you still need to apply hard work. But sometimes there's that, no, you need to, just work. Don't worry about your passion, just work, like sometimes,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, and that was kind of something that was challenging for my upbringing as well, to find, that, a job that wasn't, and it took a while, I mean, let's face it, I mean, the music industry isn't probably the easiest job either, like to get into and have a sustainable income, and that requires a lot of hard work and dedication. That's where I was getting at. Did you learn a lot of this stuff as well from your father? Was he?
No, I knew you were going to bring this up, but so the reason I not at all actually.
Okay.
My brother and dad all worked in accounting. The reason I know you said this is because I think a big turning point for me was the passing of my father.
Yeah.
But almost for the exact opposite of him teaching me. Like, he had a strong work ethic, but actually, one thing I've always done is travel a lot. And one thing I've always done, to be honest, is follow my passions. Even where it was at the detriment of what could be a career, but then stuck with it. And eventually my passion sort of became my career. But my father passing was a pivotal moment for me, because one of the last things he said to me was, I was traveling a lot, and I did have like Indian parents who were like, why are you always traveling? You need to be working. You need to be taking life seriously. Or what's this DJing about? Or what are these parties you do? Like that you got to take stuff seriously. It's kind of the conversation I had up until very recently, where suddenly, from doing better, my mum came around, but my dad was actually first to come around. And I think one thing he said, which stuck with me a bit, because he worked his whole entire life, and then when it finally came to like being retired and enjoying it, he still kind of worked, and then he wanted to travel, and then he was sort of like too old to do it. And he kind of said that to me, and he was like, I think you're doing it the right way around, and like, having sort of these mini retirements your whole life. And doing that. And then actually, like, I normally hate these sort of self-help books, but when my father passed away, me and my brother was clearing out his stuff and clearing out his office and his library, and his whole wall was filled with books about accounting and Indian politics. Like, that's all it was. And then there was one book which was the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which was like, the byline on it is leave your 9 to 5 and like I can't remember, but it's basically like just leave your job and like work as little as you can and enjoy as much and get you. And I read that book, and then it really rung true with what was essentially kind of like my dad's kind of like final sort of like message to me, and that convinced me even more that I mean, that book is a I mean, maybe people, I think super powerful CEOs can do it, but essentially it's about like outsourcing to people below you, which I noticed you did, because you didn't email me. You've got an assistant emailing me scheduling calls. So I'm just like, I'm like, wow, who's this guy Beyonce? Like, it's just a podcast. Like, come on, mate, you're not that busy. But I totally get what you're trying to do, and it probably works for you. But
mate,
I definitely take that ethos on not working all the time and like really getting to enjoy life and passions and stuff. So I respect it. I rate that you got an assistant emailing me about your podcast.
Well, mate, look, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I'm glad that we got to do it. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you and tell them about your shows and where they can hear you.
Yeah. So at Raji Rags, RAGS is my Instagram and Twitter. You can catch me monthly on NTS Radio. Again, Raji Rags. I got a monthly show of Bubble Chamber on Bellamy, and got a website, rajirags.com, where I've got like I don't know, an insane amount of archived podcasts and mixes and radio shows and bits I've done. Everything, Boiler Room, Living Proof, the whole works.
Yeah, so. Awesome. Once again, mate, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Really, great. Such a pleasure. All right, mate. Take care. Speak to you soon.